Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Global Alumni Spotlight Series featuring Mr. Eric Snyder. Before introducing Eric, I'd like to tell you a little bit about International Program's Global Alumni Spotlight Series. My name is Russ Ganem, and I am Associate Provost and Dean of International Programs and the host of this series. And our purpose is to feature in-depth conversations with University of Iowa alumni who have extensive international backgrounds or experiences. The series is designed to bring together current and prospective students, alumni, and the Hawkeye community for engaging conversations that highlight diverse experiences and expertise. Our goal is to showcase success stories of Hawkeyes who have led successful careers abroad, and Eric Snyder fits that description perfectly. Eric is an expert in international communications and marketing. Today, he'll be sharing his thoughts on how Hawkeyes can be successful in a global work environment. Much of our conversation will focus on lessons he's learned about personally navigating different cultures and business landscapes to lead diverse teams toward a common mission. Eric will also share his perspective on the various paths students can follow to pursue an international business career. Eric Snyder is a two-time Iowa graduate with BAs in journalism and religious studies, as well as an MA in sports, health, leisure, and physical studies. He has been fortunate to lead a unique and rich career, which has taken him from being an administrator in the then Iowa Women's Athletic Department to serving as an officer in the Israeli Army with an appointment in the spokesperson's unit in the Israeli Defense Forces. Eric has worked as a marketing executive for some of the most successful and innovative global businesses in the world today. He is currently Director of Public Relations at Stratasys, the largest 3D printing company in the market. Eric has been in similar roles for over 15 years, where he's been responsible for the development and implementation of the company's external communications and messaging strategy. He has led international teams responsible for media and analyst relations, as well as social media outreach across every region, balancing corporate marketing objectives with business goals in each local market. Eric's Iowa roots run deep, with family from Webster County, Iowa, where he used to work summers on the family farm while spending time at Twin Lakes. His mother, aunt, two uncles, and many beloved cousins also attended the University of Iowa. Eric and his family are also huge Hawkeye fans, and he lives with his wife and three children just outside of Tel Aviv. Thank you to everyone in the audience for attending today's webinar. I note that we'll spend about 40 minutes on the interview itself and then open the conversations to questions from the audience. Please submit your questions via the Q&A function. The webinar will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. We are honored to have Eric Snyder as our guest today. And Eric, welcome to the Global Alumni Spotlight Series. And how are you today, sir?
Russ, thank you very much. It's really great to be here. This is really an honor. It's very exciting for me. It's a little bit outside of my comfort zone as far as talking a lot about myself. I usually talk about other things aside from myself, but it's fun, and hopefully we can talk about some experiences and I can share some insights that will help people understand how to really build a career, especially, you're graduating from the University of Iowa. There's a big world out there. You want to try to tackle it. How are you going to be able to do so? So it's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate you taking the time, and obviously for the audience coming to hear us today as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Eric. I know you are taking a lot of time out of your busy schedule because you navigate a lot of different time zones. You're on calls with people in North America, Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia. You're a busy guy, and so we very much appreciate you spending some time with us today. So Eric, first of all, tell us about your Iowa origins and the links you still maintain here in Iowa.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Detroit, which is something I was blessed with. But at the same time, my mother was born and raised in Webster County. Almost everybody in the family from Iowa, including my mom, my uncle, my aunt and uncle, my cousins, and even their kids all went to the University of Iowa. And I spent my summers on my uncle's farm working with him and with my aunt and her family in Fort Dodge and at Twin Lakes. And I was really able to balance between those two worlds as far as having a farm work ethic, being grounded, also having the benefits of living in a large city such as Detroit. And really sort of the people who are my family in Iowa, I cherish greatly. They're very, very important to me. So for being able to go to Iowa was sort of a way to sort of take a step closer to them and sort of manifest sort of what was my feelings for them and for the family there. Also, my parents' best friends are from North Liberty. The Karen Kozier went to the university with my mom, and her husband Doug. They're huge Hawkeye fans. And so, for me, that was something that was really, really special and a huge draw for going to the university. And then when I got there, of course, I made some wonderful relationships with people who are very, very important to me, and I carry them with me until today. And I'm always keeping in touch or trying to do my best to keep in touch. And obviously, if I'm in town trying to visit and spend time, clearly there's never enough time. I would love to be able to spend like a week or two in Iowa City and just sit down with a lot of different people, but that's a little bit of a challenge. But Iowa roots definitely run deep in with me, and it's something I'm very proud of.
No, that's great. I mean, I think that's something that the audience always enjoys hearing, because people will leave campus. Sometimes they reconnect, sometimes they don't. But obviously, you've maintained those connections, and we are grateful to you for doing so. Definitely. So, you mentioned this a little bit, in these remarks, but tell us a little bit more about your life as a student. We know that you chose the University of Iowa, and that you came here probably all eager, but not knowing quite what to expect. What were your first experiences like on campus? Just in terms of navigating classes, the city of Iowa City, social life. What was that like for you?
So, well, I think that Iowa City, again, was far enough from home to where I could feel like a real sense of independence, but it was close enough when needed. And there was always a reassurance that I had family not far away. So, that really sort of was important to me as far as getting on campus. Quite frankly, I did not get off to a great start academically, as well as in some other areas, but I did manage to settle down. And start to be a little bit more serious about my classes. And, I really felt that there was a good social and extracurricular environment. I lived in the dorms. I was in a fraternity for a period of time. Thankfully, that ended. I ended up doing a lot with the Hillel, the Jewish Student Union, as well. And I was president of that for a year as well. And then really what was the most sort of influential and central part of my experience at the University of Iowa, beyond the coursework, was my internship in the sports information office. At the time, again, there were separate men's and women's offices, and I was interning in the men's office. And it also helped me with academics because I knew I needed to be, sort of serious. And so there was some unusual circumstances that let me get into that department, as well as with help from a gentleman by the name of Rich Retman, who is part of the, he's somebody who's with the foundation, and he's a family friend. And also, quite frankly, it was my guardian angel for the time that I was there. So, again, it was really interesting classes, lots of different things to do, meeting a lot of fascinating people. And also the relationship between downtown and the campus is really great. So it made it to be very, 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 very convenient. I think that as far as my studies go, religious studies really helped me develop my critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And sort of satisfy some curiosities I have about the world we live in. I actually did a lot of writing in religion studies. I remember that sometimes it seems like that was more than what was going on in J School as far as the amount of writing. J School, of course, is great. I think, I like the fact that they learned both the theory and the skills in our journalism school, and we have to have a minor. The idea being that it's not just about having the skills to know how to write, but you actually have to kind of know something or know how to learn about something in order to be a good journalist. And then again, my internship in the sports information office, provided me a lot of real work experiences that augmented and brought to life what I was learning in the classroom. And also journalism is incredibly dynamic. you should always consider yourself a student of journalism if you're working in that profession or something related, such as media relations or PR. And I think that the J School really gave me the skills to sort of continue to learn about the profession. So it was a great experience overall.
And, one of the things about the School of Journalism and Mass Communications that, pardon me, that I think is really impressive, and maybe it was like this when you were here, is that they really do have an international focus. The current School of Journalism and Mass Communications has faculty from all parts of the world. It has graduate students from all parts of the world. They really do take sort of a global perspective when teaching journalism. And so international programs, for example, works very closely with some of the faculty in the School of Journalism and Mass Communications simply because they promote international education in a realm that's quite important. So I don't know if it was like that when you were here, but it certainly has evolved in that direction at the present moment.
Well, it's such a small world that we live in that clearly that definitely seems like the right direction. When I was there, they were pushing some sort of opportunities for internships and different opportunities to do apprenticeships with media outside of the United States, which I thought was very, very cool. And I certainly did have some great interactions with some international students when I was in that program, and that was the great exposure as well.
Right. And, at this point, we're trying to develop some programming that will help foster some of these international connections within the realm of journalism. And some of our alumni who've gotten, master's, PhD in journalism, such as yourself, are working abroad. And so we're trying to build those networks as we internationalize our own curriculum here on campus. So it's a good synergy. So you've talked a little bit about your mentors, your professors. I'm interested in your connection with the athletics department. I mean, you had talked a little bit about people you knew and you kind of gravitated within their orbit. But I'm wondering, are you a big sports fan, for example? Where did you come here saying, okay, I really like football, I like basketball, I just like the sports scene in general, and I want to be part of that and learn how to market it from a business perspective?
Well, yeah. First of all, I was definitely a huge sports fan. Growing up in Michigan, I was a Hawkeye fan through and through, thanks to my family, which wasn't always easy, but
No.
I managed to survive. So certainly, I was definitely excited and thrilled about being able to come to the university. It really wasn't my intention to end up in athletics. I always figured that I always wanted to be like sort of the next Clarence Darrow as far as being a lawyer. Working on civil rights and things like that. But, well, quite frankly, and again, some of this goes back to Rich Redmond and then also obviously George Wine and Phil Hattie. I ended up getting arrested when I was in college. I was thrown in, and it ended up that it's a long story, but I ended up doing sort of my community service was with the athletic department.
Okay.
And that's kind of how things kind of got off. I actually kind of messed that up as well, but then Rich sort of stepped in and talked to George and Phil, I believe. I ended up with the internship in the sports information office. And then it just sort of, it went on from there. So it was sort of an interesting entrance into it, but it was obviously a dream come true. I mean, there are few professions that I can think of that are better than being, a sports information director or a media relations person in the area of sports. I think it's just a wonderful profession. Right. And, in terms of the internship that they offer or at Iowa, it was definitely something that was unique. I think that a lot of the success I have and the things I've been able to do is based upon my time with George and Phil and Steve Rowe. They were heading up the sports information office when I was there. And I really can't explain how much of an influence they had on me. It's, I am who I am because of George, Phil, and Steve. There's no doubt about it. They had an incredible influence on who I am and continue to have that influence.
Right. And so you've applied those lessons in many different realms, right? Because you've done that in business. You've worked as a spokesperson for the IDF as well. My guess is that the skills that you learned here in the athletics department are ones that you continue to draw on to this day.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that, when I think about the experience there and being in the athletic department, you think of coaches and their mentors, right? The idea is that they should be mentors. And so being exposed to so many coaches, that certainly has an impact on you. But then, like, it wasn't at the time, but afterwards it sort of dawned on me at some point that, in terms of other staff members in the athletic department, and certainly when it came to the sports information office, those individuals are mentors as well. There's no doubt about it. Certainly I learned skills that were important, learning how to write, correctly, thinking about how to deal with the media, things like that. I definitely picked up a lot of those skills again, and that sort of augmented what was happening in journalism school. But I think it really went beyond the skills. I think that one area that I take pride in terms of my current career is sort of my management style, and a lot of that comes from George, Phil, and Steve for sure. It comes down to having clear expectations for doing good work. And I think most importantly, they had the patience and they took the time to be available to explain their feedback. So they were invested in us learning and not just doing things. I don't know how many times I sat down with George or Phil and Steve, and they would be going through things, and they have the red line on things that we were writing or things that we were doing, and they would provide feedback. They'd answer questions, and that was really really important. I think also we were uniquely empowered to own our own sports. We had a chance to meet a lot of different sports information colleagues or counterparts in different schools when we were traveling with teams and things like that. And I never saw that there was students were given as much responsibility as the students were at Iowa. It just didn't seem to happen in a lot of different places. And we were always encouraged to try new things. My first year, I remember working on this sort of postseason guide with our track team and going to the Big Tens with our track. There was an example where there's this thing that's called a flip card for the football team that's used by the media relations team in the football in the press box, where it's basically a condensed source of information, especially for broadcast, with names, pronunciations, the rosters, schedules, results, things like that. And we had a flip card that had been around for a long time, and I went to the guys and said, maybe we can do something a little bit different. And we ended up redesigning the flip card, and they sort of allowed me to sort of lead that. And that was really, really exciting and empowering to see that. And I think that the flip card kind of looks like it's still more or less the same thing, which for me, it's still a great sense of pride. In baseball, I ran our baseball, running the press box, doing radio with Phil on the road, and basically allowing us to run show for a Division I baseball team. Not every student gets to do things like that. And there are plenty of other examples of things like that. When I was in graduate school, remember where there was a Sun Bowl in El Paso, Texas, and there was an issue with coverage. So they actually sent me with a men's basketball team to Colorado. As a graduate assistant, I was allowed to go and be the main media contact for that. And just the amount of confidence that gives you when you see that they're willing to trust you and put you in these positions is really, really cool. And then the last thing I think was this, like, there are very high standards in the sports information office, but there was also humanity and humor was always in the mix. I always expected to laugh at work, and I knew that there was a lot of compassion. We worked hard, and I think we did good work, but it was also just an absolute pleasure. And I know that I came away, a lot of the things I do now in terms of the work environment that I try to build, it's based upon my experiences in the sports information office.
Right. Well, I think what you described there is really kind of the University of Iowa in microcosm. We do a lot to empower our students, to give them responsibility, to give them the authority to innovate, or at least the freedom to innovate, to come up with ideas, and then to suggest them and implement them. Similarly, we have a collaborative culture here where we get along with everybody, or at least try to. We cooperate, and we don't stand on ceremony. I came to Iowa from a different institution. I was at that other institution for 18 years, and I owe a lot to that institution. But when I came here, the culture shift was noticeable in terms of, just kind of how horizontal Iowa is in its administrative and academic structure. It's like people can communicate pretty easily, and they can communicate across silos. And sure, we have barriers, But there's a certain egalitarian ethos here, or at least a willingness to listen to everybody and value their contributions. And it seems to me that this is what you experienced in the athletics department.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, I do think it's something that's unique to Iowa. I think it's a reflection of the people who go there and the state. It's again, you're going to be down to earth. You're going to be humble. You're going to take a practical approach to things, and it's not about, I don't want to characterize the East Coast, but it's not like, it's a different feel, and you definitely have a different experience because of that.
For sure. And so we see the backdrop of downtown Tel Aviv by the beach. It's a very attractive image. And so, Eric, we know that you studied abroad while you were here at the University of Iowa and that you went to Israel. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, so I did have a chance to go overseas between my junior and senior years. Again, there were a lot of obligations when it came to my internship in the athletic department, but they were very kind to allow me to go between my junior and senior years during the summer. And I was at Tel Aviv University. I was on a kibbutz seminar for a period of time. A kibbutz is a collective farm. And then I was actually on campus for another month or two. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but I remember it was a really, really great experience. I was able to pick up a lot of credits for a short period of time. And, it was just fascinating to see the campus at Tel Aviv University, have an opportunity to move around the country, see different things. And I really sort of fell in love with the country. And I knew that, for me, again, at that time, like trying to understand what's going on in Israel, like I knew I was going to have to go all in at some point. And all in meant giving up things that I really loved and I really cherished as far as working in the sports information office. But I just had that curiosity and I had that sort of interest in trying something completely different. And so, yeah, it led to a fundamental change in sort of my thinking and how I understood. I understood I was going to be making a sacrifice, but it was something that was really profound. My experience being overseas as far as broadening my perspective and thinking about what it would be like to live in a different part of the world. And so I decided to pursue it.
Well, that's what often happens with study abroad. People are so profoundly marked by the experience, by getting to know a different culture, in some cases a different language, a different way of living, that it stays with them forever. And it kind of changes, at least to a certain extent, sort of who they are. People will adapt kind of different challenges. They become curious about different things. And it's it's a growth experience on both a personal and a professional level. And that's one of the reasons why in this office, we promote study abroad as vigorously as we do, because we know that it can be a life-changing event. And even if it isn't, it's still going to create memories and experiences that people will carry with them for the rest of their lives. And obviously, in your case, it had a very profound effect.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is something that you don't expect everybody to move overseas, but at the same time, it's something that you'll carry with you. And also, as we were talking about, the topic of the day, as far as building a career or finding that path into an international role, having an opportunity to study overseas at some point is something that will definitely help you along that path.
Definitely. And so, kind of along those lines, Eric, can you tell us about your current position? How you began at Stratasys? Is that the name of the company?
Yeah. So Stratasys is a company that I joined actually in September.
Okay.
And again, for me, like as far as my experience in Israeli high tech, it basically came on the background of what I was doing in Iowa, and then I had time in the Army as well. And since then, I've been heading up PR now at Stratasys for a few months, where I have a team. Somebody's in Minnesota as well. Our North American offices are there, so I have to deal with Gophers all the time.
Yeah, wow.
Which it's not the best thing, but we can all talk about how much we love Hot Dish and
Yeah.
things seem to work out. We find a way
Mhm.
to work and communicate.
But we can get along.
But
Yes. Mhm.
yeah, exactly. So we're a global company. We've been around for about 20 years. We're traded on Nasdaq,
Mhm.
um, and we're selling 3D printers, the ones that are for manufacturing and for
Okay.
prototyping. So it's not the type that you would put in your garage in order to build some figurine, but it's rather for applications such as for aerospace, automotive. Example of some customers of ours: NASA is one, Boeing is another customer of ours, McLaren F1, Peugeot, Ford. Then we also do things like, we're printing dentures. We're big in the dental space as well,
Mhm.
and all these different areas like that. And it's global. So, I'm working with counterparts, both in terms of from the product marketing side, from the regional marketing side. We also have our corporate entities that we're working with. So some are in Israel, some are in Minnesota. Regionally, again, my day started this morning with a call with somebody in Seoul.
Mhm.
And just a short while ago, I was having a call with somebody in Minnesota. And during the day, I'm having across time zones, different meetings and conversations as well. So really sort of, working in an international environment like that, being a global company, is something that's, I find it to be fascinating and very rewarding.
Right. And so what do you think are the best practices for sort of maintaining a sense of, balance between cultures and navigating different cultures? Because, on the one hand, you're dealing with North American cultures, East Asian cultures, South Asian cultures, Middle Eastern cultures. How does that, what's your playbook, to take an athletic term, for dealing with those sort of cultural nuances, or in some cases, maybe the behaviors aren't so nuanced, and you really have to kind of play the diplomat. What have you learned over the years?
I've learned a lot in terms of, when it comes to doing business and doing PR in different countries. It's vastly different. The way the media work in a country like Cameroon is different from the way that the media work in Brazil, which is different from the way they work in North America, as opposed to the UK, as opposed to Russia, as opposed to Korea. Even some things I remember are very unique about Poland, doing some PR in Poland. Like each place is, definitely has its sort of unique flavors to them. And the first thing is just sort of being open to it and understanding that things are going to be different. Again, I think what I learned in J school was really, really important. But honestly, a lot of the theory stuff actually helped a lot because, again, there were differences in different markets. And so if you can take and think about it that way when you're adjusting to working with different media, it was really, really helpful.
Mhm.
And it actually started for me when I was in the Army. I was head of the year, like when I was in the spokesperson's unit. First thing they did was they put me in charge of the European media,
Right.
and actually rest of world. So it's sort of funny. Like I also dealt with other regions as well, but like it was like it's incredibly different than what I grew up with as far as understanding media. If you're dealing with the Russians, it's completely different than dealing with the English and the French. And this was back in like 2000. I know that like media in North America has changed, right? If you turn on Fox News, if you turn on MSNBC, you're getting two different perspectives. You're getting different sources of information. You're getting different information. When I was in J school, we weren't learning that way. We were learning that you're supposed to be objective as you can be, knowing that there's going to be some sort of perspective that you're carrying with you. But
Right.
like all of a sudden, when you're dealing with like the Guardian, or walks in and wants to do an interview with you, or the Telegraph, or BBC versus Sky, or Le Monde against instead of Le Figaro, they were coming with a clear agenda. Now they were very professional media because it's covering the Middle East. They send very good media, but each one comes with a different agenda, and so it's completely different. You have to be open to that, and that was really, really sort of eye-opening for me when it came to what was going on. In addition to that, like just also being very sensitive to the geopolitical considerations was something that I had to be able to do when I was in the Army. And so
Mhm.
you're really, really more sensitive to what happens in different countries and different regions.
Right.
So it sort of started with doing that. But then when it comes to like building out the career, I think that there were other things that you need to be able to do. Number one is to be able to pay attention to reactions and communication issues, like with the people you're working with. and you want to be able to see how people are reacting. So that's one thing you need to be certainly aware of what's going on. Just a couple examples from my experience. One will go back to the Army was that, like, when I was head of European media, I had a soldier from, let's see, I had a soldier from France, I had a soldier from Italy, I had a soldier from Brazil, I had a soldier from Germany, I had an Israeli, and it was myself that were at one point doing, and I remember in the unit, and we would have meetings in Hebrew, and then nothing was getting done, and I couldn't understand why things weren't getting done. And again, being a communicator, I first look at myself. What am I doing wrong? And I realized that none of us were native Hebrew speakers, or one of them was, but we weren't communicating, we weren't being effective. So I had to pay attention and understand what was going on, and that was like a fundamental issue with language. But then also you can look at how people are reacting to things. Israeli society people are very blunt.
Mhm.
And so, I have to be very careful as far as when I'm speaking to people who are not Israeli, because of the fact that, and I can tell, like, if I've said something that came off a little bit too much, too strong, because of the fact of how they're reacting. And then I know to tone it back. Usually, again, I think I do okay with that, but every so often I can still fall into that trap.
Right.
Explaining differences in work culture. Again, I've been managing teams in different regions. So, like, if you know and you can explain and help them understand, it helps you avoid unnecessary issues, because you can very easily get offended. Again, using Israelis, we have loud voices, we send short emails, we have different concepts of hierarchy. So, I've had American counterparts who've been in meetings where Israelis are screaming at each other, and they think somebody's going to get murdered, and that people are very angry, and it's just, they talk loudly, it's very boisterous, people are passionate, but then they go out and they have lunch.
Mhm.
You'll get an email that will say, "Where is this?" and nothing else. And people definitely, there's some people who don't appreciate that. But on the flip side, like, Americans are seen as being that they have a challenge being straightforward. And the English are even worse than the Americans when it comes to this. But like, a classic example would be, if you're saying if your boss sends you something and you think it's a bad idea. In Israel, you'll just write back, "It's a bad idea. Send it back." That's it. With an American, most often, and certainly with English, it would be, "That's a very interesting idea. I understand why you're saying this, but I think that there could be some concerns, and allow me to lay them out, A, B, C, and D." You're saying the same thing to your boss, but one of them, it's like, "It's a bad idea. Get out of my face." And the other one, it's like, I'll be polite and courteous while I tell you why it's a bad idea.
Right. And so personally, you must have had to adapt. I mean, coming from the US, where we try to be diplomatic, we try to talk things through. We're not as direct as, say, folks in Israel or other parts of the world. There are some. I was just in Nigeria recently, and there folks can be very direct. And it's a situation where you kind of have to brace yourself, kind of get used to it, acclimate, and then figure out what your strategy is going to be. So you must have undergone at least somewhat of a personal transformation, when you first got to Israel, and then learned that, okay, I'm going to have to communicate differently.
Yeah, and it didn't, it's you learn. And actually, my wife always, she laughs about, like, this classic example of when I was learning Hebrew. Like, here again, you sort of escalate when you're dealing with different service providers. So whether it be your HMO, your healthcare, dealing with other, like, anybody you're interacting with, service here is sometimes you have to sort of be a little bit more aggressive when it comes to your tone and things like that. And my wife would say, like, even ordering pizza, I would be calm, American, and then I would just explode. And I didn't know how to calibrate and sort of escalate the tone correctly.
Right.
In order, so, like, these people who are on the other line are speaking to somebody with an American accent who's very polite, and the next thing you know, it's like, I'm just, like, blowing up, and they have no, and it's not an effective way to get what you need.
No, that's, I mean, yeah. And I guess it's still an ongoing process, right? That, we never quite, attain the level that we see. Another question that I wanted to ask you, and you kind of alluded to this before, is, when you prepare for meetings, and when you kind of do research on world events. I know that there are certain resources, sort of trusted media outlets that you always consult. Can you share those with us and then explain why these media outlets are so useful to you and so reliable?
Yeah, I think that one thing that's really really important is sort of being attentive to what's happening in the world. And if you're speaking with people in different regions, it's really really important to, especially being American, it's really really important to sort of show that you're paying attention and show that you care about who they are and what their sort of perspective is, because there is a perception out there, and I hear it when I meet, especially when I'm meeting people from outside of the U.S. for the first time, that Americans may not be as they're not necessarily the most knowledgeable about what's happening in the world. They're a little bit more, I don't know, ethnocentric, but certainly a little bit more focused on what's happening in the U.S. as opposed to what's happening elsewhere. So it's really, really important to sort of, if you're getting into an international world, to be paying attention to what's happening in the world. And so, I would start by, following the news. And as far as like probably the three media outlets that I enjoy the most is, in terms of magazine, it's The Economist. I think you can learn a lot about what's happening in the world based upon that. BBC World Service, which is on radio, and I know I don't remember if KRUI is still pulling that or not, but I believe that there is public radio in Iowa that broadcasts BBC World Service. And then, quite frankly, the PBS NewsHour is still my main go-to. In fact, it's still part of like every day. My day starts with a broadcast. I play on YouTube the broadcast from the evening before, and I find it to be less sensational, a little bit more challenging. I definitely hear perspectives that I'm not necessarily want to hear, which is ultimately good as a consumer of news. And so that's something that's really, really important. And then again, I think it's, if you're getting into a meeting, if you're talking to somebody that's, somewhere in the world, look a little bit, find out, Google, just get into Wikipedia, understand a little bit about the country, maybe Google the news in that certain country, just so you have a little bit of an understanding of who they are, where they're coming from, and you can say something. So, if you're talking to somebody in Mozambique, right, it's good to know that, number one, it was a Portuguese colony, so they mostly speak Portuguese. They have amazing shrimp there, right? That's like what they're known for, is their shrimp. So like you're going to score a lot of points with your international colleagues if you can say, oh, I've heard you guys have got great shrimp. I would love it. Like you can see the delight on people's faces when you're taking a step to actually relate to who they are and where they're coming from. And especially when it comes from an American, because America is still seen, there's this, it's put on a sort of a special higher pedestal in a lot of places. So when an American colleague is talking about the soccer that's happening in a certain country, or something like that, it really makes a big difference. It builds bridges very quickly.
Right, and I can certainly verify what you've said, because that it's true to my own experience and a lot of other people that I know who are who have pursued international careers. If you can make some kind of cultural gesture, be it through language, food, sports, literature, arts, it really does go a long way in terms of establishing connections. And I fully agree with you with respect to the media outlets. The Economist is wonderful. I started subscribing to it years ago, and just in terms of world news, it's impeccable. I mean, the level of research, and just how much you end up learning by reading a single article in The Economist can really be quite helpful. Same with BBC. In Iowa, we do subscribe. IPR, International Iowa Public Radio, does carry the BBC World Service, I think, after 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and it runs all into the wee hours. So you can definitely get your fill of the of the BBC, and then PBS obviously is a great resource as well. So yes, I think that's really good advice to students, especially who are trying to inform themselves about what's going on in the world. And maybe one other thing I would add is just if there is an English language newspaper, usually online, that is published in the country that you are visiting, try to read it at least on a semi-regular basis, familiarize yourself with current events. That way you can look like less of a stranger when you visit the country itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's really about sort of learning and understanding. Again, like the person who was on my team who was from Pakistan that was living in Canada. There's flooding going on. So before I would get on calls, I always just sort of check to see what was going on in Pakistan, just to understand what sort of mindset he would be in and what was going on with his behind the scenes in his workplace or in his life. And if there's flooding going on and he's concerned about his family, that's a good thing to know. They just beat India in cricket. He's going to be in a very good mood, right? It just sort of depends on the individual, and sort of if you can look and understand what's going on back home or in their homes, it's something that can definitely help you out.
Very good, very good. So Eric, we've got a lot of questions from the audience, and many of them are quite fun. So I hope you don't mind some fun questions along with the serious ones.
Oh, no, I only want horrible questions. I thought we talked agreed in advance. We only take horrible questions.
We only take horrible questions, but we don't have any yet, maybe. But it's we still have some time. But so I wanted to so the first question, and you've alluded to this, but Morgan asks, are there resources that have helped you navigate different cultures and business environments? Now, we've talked about, media outlets, but I'm wondering if there are certain, I don't know, training sessions that you have access to, or if there are, like mini certificate programs that you've that you've taken that have helped you in terms of your professional development, because we all of us have to, continue to hone our game, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And there again, experience is the best way. Being able to expose yourself as much as you can, that's important. But there certainly are other resources that are available. Like there are some professionals who do train about cultural differences. And a lot of times, like in your workplace, like they'll be hired by your employers. If it's something that isn't happening, but you feel that there's a need, you can ask, HR, or you can ask your L&D, your learning and development team, to sort of set something up. I remember I was at a company years ago where we were opening up a larger presence in India, and all of a sudden we were working with a lot of Indians, and there was a lot of frustration when it came to that, and it didn't get off to a great start. And our leadership actually was wise enough to say, wait a second, there's a cultural thing here, Indians and Israelis. Let's bring in somebody who could talk to us. And I just remember one example of that, as far as the frustration was that, like in Indian work culture, most often, like if you ask somebody a question such as, will this project be ready by March 4th? Most often your Indian counterpart will say yes, even if there's no chance it'll be ready on March 4th. Part of the culture there is to say yes, it's not to say no. And so there's a lot of frustration. These new colleagues are trying to do things, trying to deliver projects, and we don't know if it's a real deadline or not a real deadline. And so the person talked to us about the fact that, first of all, he said, they don't lie, they're just not necessarily telling you the truth, and how to sort of frame your questions to help them give you the accurate information that you need. So when will this be ready? Things like that were just and it helped iron out a lot of different things. There's also an issue of hierarchy in India where, if you have a boss and somebody on their team on the call, the person on the team will not answer questions unless the boss calls upon them, while the Israeli one, everybody is speaking at the same time. So you have resources like that. Also, like, I'm not sure if the Tempe Business School, they may have some options about, or some courses or coursework that can be done. Obviously, I think the international program, doing a series like this and doing other things, can provide some exposure as far as how to deal with different cultural differences as well. So there are definitely different resources that are out there. And quite frankly, today you can actually go out and Google as well. Like, I remember seeing some video about how you give a business card to somebody in Japan,
Right.
because you can easily offend somebody in terms of the manner in which you provide, or even more important, the way you receive the business card from somebody in Japan. And then you can find online. There's so much content online these days that you can also go online.
Right. I have made that mistake myself. And so I wish that I had done my own research. And our colleagues in Japan were so polite and so friendly that they, at least if they were offended, they didn't show it. Nonetheless, I found out afterwards that I was doing it incorrectly. And so I needed to brush up on the proper protocols. So what you're saying is very, very well taken. And right, there are resources online. I'm sure that companies can bring in consultants as well. And it's important. I mean, not just because you want to close the deal, but you really want to make some interpersonal connections too that will help you not just professionally but also personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, usually the HR departments or the L&D department, they love it when you come and ask for something like this. Like they're delighted when you ask for help in an area like this. They love it, and they'll usually be very, very enthusiastic about trying to set something up.
Right. Because from an HR perspective, they're not dealing with some sort of, in this case, they're not dealing with some sort of offense or violation. This is the fun part of HR, where you're actually kind of helping people and educating them and allowing them to perform better in their jobs.
Absolutely.
Great. So other questions from Matt, who asks, how big of a transition was it working in college sports in the United States to traveling overseas and adapting to a new culture and job?
It was not easy. Again, I think that I came away with a lot of skills, a lot of understanding. I think that I was well grounded based upon what was happening in the athletic department. And Russ, by the way, I do want to mention a few other people when the time is right. But I think that for me it was definitely very difficult. Also, like, I went into basic training and I didn't really speak Hebrew, so like there was a complete culture shock. Not only is it the shock of going into basic training, which as dangerous as I look, I'm not necessarily born for the Army, but going through that and not understanding the language, that was like a huge challenge. Fortunately, I had a lot of support. My girlfriend, now wife at the time, was very supportive in terms of helping me get through like a lot of the sort of the shock and the sort of the challenges and the questions I had. There was definitely a lot of doubt whether or not I would be able to get through it. And then all of a sudden I end up in the unit where I'm dealing with all the top media, having to go on and do things with the military that were just, again, it's on a geopolitical level that it's just sort of different. At the time, the Second Intifada was taking place. Mm-hmm. So it was basically the biggest conflict that was going on. We had about 1,500 journalists in Israel at the time. And, all of a sudden I was exposed to sort of military and diplomatic thinking that was like both strategic and tactical, but at levels that it was just sort of different. Having to deal with like Judith Miller from the New York Times. She ended up getting into a little bit of trouble with some of the stuff she was doing in Iraq. Right. I remember her approaching me about a correction regarding the application of Jordanian law for minors in the West Bank. And like all of a sudden, oh my, okay, when she comes to you and she asks you something like that, you have to think, and you have to make sure that you should be wise enough to consult with some people as well, which I do because I'm never smart enough to handle. Like, it's good to talk to other people, but it's like it's just like completely different. Again, dealing with all of a sudden Russian media, which
Sure.
is very challenging, very, very different. In certain ways, is crazy. How do you deal, with something like that? So like the transition was not easy. Was not easy. And like another thing that would happen is like apropos the BBC World Service, they would call like inevitably 2 or 3 times a week. They would call me at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and they were always very polite because they're very British, and they would say, excuse me, Captain Snyder, but there's been some explosion somewhere, and we'd like you to go on air in 10 minutes and explain what happened. So I'm woke from the dead of sleep. I have to call a soldier, figure out what happened, then be able to go on air and explain what happened. And knowing that the stakes were high, right? Again, you say the wrong thing, and some people may be going to the Hague, and being dragged into the Hague for being accused of committing crimes. So like you had to be able to manage things like that as well, and it was definitely it took a little while to figure out how to sort of manage that stuff.
Right. Well, it must have been very, very stressful, because you're dealing with very difficult situations, potentially hostile audiences, and under circumstances where you could easily be either misquoted, misinterpreted, and where you don't really have a lot of time to prepare either. So I can see where, in those situations, you'd feel vulnerable on many different levels.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I was always on my toes. There was a lot of reward when it came to that role, but it was also, it was quite taxing.
For sure, for sure. Very good. And since I'm a language person, I did want to just digress for a second and ask about how you learned Hebrew. What was that process like? Did you take classes? Did you pick it up just by talking to people? Did you have kind of when did it start to really connect for you?
I took a class when I first moved, and it was a pretty intensive class. It was a good course, but especially Israel, like most Israelis speak English, and they like to speak English with people who are from an Anglo speaking country.
Yeah.
And so you don't necessarily have to speak English. Also, when I first moved, I ended up in this PR agency. Actually, the guy who owned it used to be like the #2 PR person for the LA Dodgers, and then he had a partner who was from Miami. And I actually put an Israeli flag in the office because just to make sure I remembered where I was. So I never really had a chance to practice the language. But then once I got in the Army, like it was do or die. And so it just continued to get better and better. Being somebody who studied, and works in communications, I still feel like I sound like a second grader sometimes when I speak Hebrew. But at the same time, I know I can function, so it's good enough.
Very
It's
good.
good
Well,
enough. But it definitely takes time, and it was to sink or swim. That was like the only way for me to sort of pick up the language was I had no other choice.
for sure. And then there's the whole alphabet issue too. I mean, that's got to be, that just adds another challenge, which must have been very, very difficult to deal with.
The language is in the beginning, it's a little intimidating because it's they are different letters, but after you get them, that's actually that's not that tough.
Really?
And actually, Hebrew only has 3 verb tenses. I took like Spanish in high school, and I think there were like 13 verb tenses.
Sure. Okay.
So like that, actually, Hebrew's not it's, again, I'm challenged with languages, but yeah, Hebrew's not the toughest one to learn from what I understand.
Okay. Very good. All right. Couple of other questions and comments. One is from Tanya, who says that she really appreciates how you are willing to share your mistakes, and your setbacks, and especially within the context of how you've learned from them. So that's the way that you present those lessons learned from your own experience, I think really helps it gives people confidence to say, okay, yeah, there were certain moments in my life where maybe things didn't go the way I wanted them to. Maybe I kind of messed up a little bit, but look, here's where I am now. Here's what I learned from it. And those are all really, really valuable lessons.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Tanya, for the comment. And I think it's true. I mean, look, we're all people. We're not superheroes. We're going to make mistakes. Bad things are going to happen. We're going to be frustrated. There will be setbacks. If you can self-reflect and sort of, figure out, get through the pain of whatever that may be, figure out a way to flush it, and but self-reflect on what's happening, you're going to be fine. Just keep plowing away, keep your head down, and you'll be fine. Because it'll happen. Like, there will be bad days, there will be things that you mess up. It's part of life.
Right, and you do have opportunities to repair those mistakes, at least in most cases. But it's really, really good advice. So lots of sports questions here. A lot of them related to your Michigan background. So you have to be happy about the Lions. I'm a big football fan myself. My wife's from Michigan. I'm happy about the Lions. I honestly didn't think we'd ever see this day. Did you?
No. I actually, I went to I grew up with season tickets to the Lions for a few years, including when they were good. I went to the game when they beat Dallas in, was it 91, I guess. And had you told me that it would be 32 years before we would, enjoy this sweet taste of victory again, I never would have believed it. So yeah, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm in a weird, uncharted territory. I don't know what to do. It's just thrilling. But then, quite honestly, the Hawkeyes as well, right? They won the Big Ten West again. This is awesome.
Right.
Obviously it's been a very fascinating year. My friends in the sports information office, I tip my hat to them. I don't know how they're dealing with everything that's going on, because it's just so surreal, the circumstances with the offense, all the off-field sort of things that have been happening. Obviously now we've got a new breakthrough with what's happening with the gambling. I don't know how they deal with it. I just tip my cap, and but the Hawkeyes, they're doing great across the board. Different sports, baseball, women's basketball, of course. Men are picking it up again, and a lot of the non-rev sports as well are doing really well. So it's always great to be a Hawkeye,
right.
And if you're following the sports, it's definitely a good time.
And we're excited about our new athletic director too, Beth Getz.
Right.
Her hire was formalized or officially announced late last week. So that's fantastic news. So just to get back to the Lions for a second, where are you going to watch the game?
So I have cleared the calendar for Monday morning my time, and I told my boss that you will not be finding me, because I think I titled it Football Recovery, as far as like I've got blocked out my entire morning. So it will be it'll kick off is at 1:30 in the morning.
Okay.
Hopefully my two sons will be with me. I have my older son is in the Navy. I'm hoping he's coming home this weekend. My younger son will definitely be there. And we will be watching in the middle of the night, as we normally do, eating popcorn and nachos. And we do the same thing for the Hawkeyes. And my kids have been really disciplined as far as over the years. Like, if it's a game like that, they know to go to bed at 9:30, because Saturday night is a school night for the Hawkeyes. We go to school on Sunday here. So they go to bed at 9:30. They wake up at whatever ungodly hour it takes place. And then we sit and we cheer as quietly as possible. So, exactly. And the same thing will be happening with the Lions, because
not to wake up the rest of the house. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and then and we do have a question from I think him. Is it Matan Snyder? Am I pronouncing the name correctly?
Yeah, Matan Snyder. That is my older son, who is on a Navy base right now in the north of Israel.
Okay, and so Matan, right?
Yes.
He asked, will the Lions win the Super Bowl?
Don't know. Look, I don't even, I don't know. It's I'm still getting used to the fact that I'm using Super Bowl in my lexicon when it relates to Lions. Like it still feels uncomfortable to say Lions and Super Bowl in the same sentence. I think most Lions fans are overcoming, have to come to terms with that. So, I hope so. I hope so. We'll see.
Very good. Very good. Well, we will keep our fingers crossed. And so we do have 1 minute left, Eric, and I know you wanted to thank some people or acknowledge some people, so please go ahead.
Well, yeah, we talked a lot in the beginning as far as like sort of Iowa and sort of the impact that they had. And, I talked a lot about George, Phil, and Steve. And, quite frankly, again, I carry that they are people who had profound influence on who I am. But, there are other people who I still also had a big influence and people who I enjoy and cherish. And I would be remiss not to mention some of these people. Matt Weitzel, who's still in sports information, and Tracy Wagner, who's still there. Some people who were there as well, Teresa Walenta, Jerry Palmer, and Beth Elkin, and in my Boston women's side at the time, Sherilyn Fiveash. These are just absolutely wonderful people who I dearly cherish. If I think about coaches, I wanted to mention Dwayne Banks and Scott Brookhammer from baseball, Larry Wazorik. He had his track meet this last weekend, and Steve Houghton. Gable is somebody who has, like, when you enter Gable's world, you're in a completely different world, and it's something that you like. I had the honor of working with him for 1 year, and it was just fascinating. And like just the way he gets you motivated and thinking about things and how you think about success and how you get through tough spots is something that is like really interesting to be able to go through, and it's something I carry with myself. Gail Blevins on the softball team, she was somebody who was a phenomenal coach and a great role model. There are other people on the staff like Greg Morris from the who and the equipment side with the men. Also Larry Cookman and Peggy. We lost Larry a while back, but wonderful people, Boyd Murray and John Streif as well. And the rest of the staff, like really, I can think about the people in the athletic department. I can smile and I think about these people a lot. When it comes to media, like Bob Brooks was somebody who was really, really kind and always great. John Campbell on the TV side, and Randy Peterson were people who I always enjoyed and I think very kindly of. And there are professors like Dan Berkowitz and Benjamin Honeycutt and many others who really had a lot of impact, both in terms of academically, but also how I think about the world. So if we're family here, this is a family conversation. All of us Hawkeyes. It's really important for me to recognize as many as possible because I really do feel like they're with me all the time, and they've had a profound influence on who I am.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, that just kind of makes our hearts sing, to hear about how all of these people have influenced you and have touched your life and helped make you who you are. And we're very proud of you, Eric, and your success, and because you've faced a lot of challenges and have overcome them and have led a very, very successful life. And so you're a real example, a role model for other international Hawkeyes to follow. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for promoting the black and gold, and go Hawks and go Lions.
Go Lions, go Hawks. And for the students and the people that are on the call, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help out a Hawkeye. So if you have additional questions, looking for specific help, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to help out the Hawks.
Well, that's terrific, Eric. Thank you. We're very grateful, and we hope to see you on campus sometime soon.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Russ.
Thank you, Eric. All right, and thank you to the audience. This was a wonderful discussion. You'll be able to see the recording online on our YouTube channel in about a week's time. Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.